Okay, dear students, happy afternoon and welcome to the second semester. The subject that I'm going to deal is IT projects and processes. So we call it as ITPP in a short terminology. Okay. Now, there are some instructions before I start the actual session. Please do ensure that you are vigilant because you just logging into the session does not guarantee the attendance. There are methods that we've been asked to evaluate and we know how it's got to be done as well. Okay, I'm going to disable your mics and then going to get you involved because it's very important that you need to be interactive and you need to be responding. Okay, and your responses are recorded and they are communicated back to ViproCell. All right, fine. Okay. This is my profile. Before I start, just give you the quick background of what I am. I'm Dr. Rajan. So I've been in the industry over the last 27 plus years, and I've gone across multiple verticals. I've been into healthcare. I'm into banking and financial service insurance. I've been into software development and infrastructure process, BPOs. Okay, I was into automobile manufacturing, division. So current assignment has been, as a good Chief Information Security Officer at Cover Group, and I was a Group Chief Technology Officer for Cura Healthcare, which is a medical devices design and manufacturing company. I was a Chief Executive Officer for a company where we do the software development, IT infrastructure management, and SAP for Middle East and India. I was a Chief Information Security Officer and Data Privacy Officer for ThinkSoft Global Services, a software testing company focused on catering to American European communities on the BFSI. I was a head of technology for a company called Opcom Networks, which is more into networking. That's where I started learning how to go about designing the entire networks and information security. In fact, I've started my career with TVS Group of companies. I was the head of defense segment, managing the entire strategic business unit. I have the doctorate in technology management. I'm a student of BITS, so I've done my MS from BITS. I have an MBA from the School of Management, a premier institution. Part of the certifications, okay, that's fine, but I'm a practitioner, so I would be able to give you, from a practitioner perspective, what it is all about. Okay, this subject, we call it as IT processes and projects. Okay, this is scheduled for 16 sessions. This subject has got three important domains or baskets. One, there is an extract from software project management and software engineering. Then there is a basket or a domain where I need to teach you on ITIL framework. ITIL refers to Information Technology Infrastructure Libraries, okay, which has got 8 books on the best practices that are required to be followed by IT processes in any given company. The third basket is more on CMI. So it has got 2 subdivisions, one for software development, other one is for a service. So if you look at it, the entire subject is broken down into only these 3 segments. Now, the software project management and software engineering could last for about 4 sessions, and ITIL would last for about 7 sessions. CMMI would last for about 4 sessions. So if you add them up, so about 15 sessions, we'll have 1 session buffer, and that's how the entire session proceedings would be. So you would gain a competitive advantage by virtue of attending these sessions, where you'll be exposed to understand the knowledge that is required for becoming a successful software project manager. And when you were involved in ITIL framework implementation, or if you were an associate or an engineer for managing the IT infrastructure projects of your client, then you need to understand the best practices. That's what customer is going to expect when you go from Wipro perspective. So that I would, though there are about 12 to 15 different processes that are available in ITL framework, I would selectively do about 7 to 8 processes which are very critical and touch upon the most important practices that one has to understand. Okay. Then provide you how to go about evaluate CMM practices for maturing an organization from level 1 to level 5. I think that's how the 16 sessions are broken down. So carefully follow me. All the sessions that I'm going to teach you and talk to you. So in this session, what we will do is I'll touch upon some of the basic definitions. Then I would also take you through the difference between a standard and frameworks. Because in today's context, everything is becoming a service. An organization can establish differentiator only by virtue of your processes and methods that you follow. So how do you make your organization as a unique, which is something can stand differently from the competition? Now, software life cycle, but we're not going to discuss in detail what each software model is all about, but we will actually look at how each model is different. And if you are a software project manager, how do you go about choosing the right model and recommend to the customers? And everything is becoming agile today because customers are not willing to wait and the business is very agile. Okay, the more and more new business that are coming up and the time to live in the market looks to be very, very smaller. So agile methods are the one which are overcoming the shortfalls in the traditional methods. So you need to understand what agile methods are. We would look at agile framework with a specific reference to Scrum. Okay, that's the most widely adopted framework under agile. And the difference between PMI versus the Prince2. Prince2, these two are certifications for you to become a successful software project manager. PMI is a project management institution in US. They offer a certification for software project manager. And Prince2 is again a certification offered for a project manager to become very successful. But this is from UK. The Government of Commerce in UK, they offer this. Otherwise, if you want to pursue your certification to become a successful project manager, and if you are looking at long term in US, go with PMI. If you see that now your future is more to do with your UK-based customers and you're going to settle down in UK, pursue Prince2 certification because that's how the customers are looking at it. So I'll also take you through the difference between a project versus program and some of the software project phases, the amount of time that is consumed by each of the phase in software project. More importantly, stay connected. I'm going to ask you to read. We will discuss at least 4 different scenarios and the answers for the scenarios. Okay, that's very important because that's what the questions are going to be as well. I'm going to disable mic, ask one of you to read, and I would ask at least a cross section of 10 to 12 people the solutions for it, and we will discuss about it. Okay, fine. Now, these words are quite interchangeably used in today's context. IT is becoming a service. We have IT infrastructure, project, process, and service. But first, we'll understand what this terminology is all about and how one has to understand, interpret these terminologies. They're very important because it cannot be interchangeably used when you are studying an MTech at an institution, premier institution. We must be able to very clearly differentiate these terminologies. Okay. Now, what does IT infrastructure means? Now, what are the various components IT infrastructure constitutes? Now, in my experience, there are 6 different categories of IT assets that constitutes the IT infrastructure as a whole. So it is not just the software alone that you're going to manage. Software will have to work, and there are so many other IT hardware infrastructure, network infrastructure, cabling infrastructure, all are required. So if you look at comprehensively, the IT infrastructure today should comprises of the computer hardware, which is your low-end, mid-end, and high-end servers. The second component is the software. The software refers to the operating systems that are installed on all the servers, which could be homogeneous or heterogeneous. It need not be a one single operating system. Enterprise applications like ERP or HRMS or employee portal or your Tally, your mailing solutions, the remote access VoIPs, okay, and mobile applications. They all constitute the software systems. The third component is network devices, which includes the routers, firewalls, intrusion prevention system, the intrusion detection system, load balancers, the manageable switches, extenders, cabling infra. The fourth component is storage systems. When you look at storage system, there are network attached storage, there are high-end super technology, the SAN, the storage area networks. Could also include the offsite storage in LTO tapes. LTO is the linear tape open, which is the magnetic tapes. The fifth component is telecommunication and cooling infrastructure, such as voice over IP, EPBX, IP phones, IoT devices, including IPTVs, IP cameras, okay, air conditioning systems and power systems. The sixth component is internet platforms, which includes internet lines, branch office connectivity, and the connectivity between you and your project team and the customers, which are all customer specific networks, which are tunneled and managed through IPsec VPN tunnel links. All these constitutes your IT infrastructure. So you need to understand that's why there are three different kind of a basket that you need to learn. If you want to manage, you have to manage everything. All these are required to be managed. It is not just the software alone. All right. Fine. So when you talk about IT services, today everything is service because gone are the days where applications are developed and they're tested. Then you as an application selling company go hunt for customers and the customers talk to you, discuss on the number of licensing, then they get the licenses, get this hardware, customize it, install it. So much of time. But today they are all available, right? As a SaaS, you have software as a service, okay, including the application services like ERP services, SAP, Oracle. They are all available as a software as a service, hosted. You need to only find out the scope of what is that your organization needs. If it's a manufacturing, or you continuous manufacturing, discrete manufacturing. Okay, if it is services, do you require a software, project management services? And do you also need billing collection? You need tracking of logistics, sales, marketing. What is the scope that is required? Based on the scope, they can configure and then tell you this is available. You can start using it. So now everything is becoming a service. Even on the AWS, when you want development, you can have the entire DevOps is available. You will have to just buy it as a service as long as you want to use it. Software, the data storage is available as a service in the cloud. So in the context of the dramatic changes that are happening in the marketplace, you got to understand what services means. So these are all including services only. So there are two, if you're an IT service manager or a head of IT infrastructure, then there are two important sides of the coin that you got to look for it. One, internal customers to whom you offer services. Two, the external customers. When I say internal customers, let's say now you work for a company as an IT manager where the management wants you to roll out a HRMS software. Okay. Now HRMS software is one where you have recruitment happens there, training happens there, appraisal happens there. Okay. Now, who's the customer internally to you? All those, primarily the owner is the HR head. But all those who use the HRMS application inside your company, they're all becoming your stakeholders, customers. So you got to offer services to them as well, which is internal customer. If it's an external customer, then if you're a developer in Amazon, okay, then you got an Amazon no ERP site. The ERP site is being used by all the end users. When they log in, create their credentials, and they start placing orders, then you are entitled to address the issues faced by the customers who uses the e-commerce site. Or in case of Wipro kind of projects, Wipro kind of an organization where there are multiple projects that happen. Now, these projects, your customer might have asked you to have a dedicated network as well. So you are required to speak to the customer, which is an external customer, and understand what customer needs to be able to connect your entire project resources from remote to the customer services, customer place. So you need to offer services to both internal and external customer. In that case, the most important fundamental requirement is how do you manage your SLAs, the service level agreements. The service level agreements, the design and implementation monitoring, we would anyway discuss a little more in detail. But now in service, the moment when we talk about a service level agreement becomes very important. Now, let's say now you sign up with Amazon or you sign up with SAP for an ERP system which is hosted at the data center of an SAP in California. But now you'll have to agree with them on quite a few things. No, as an SLA, number one, the uptime of this application. If this application is being used by your people, it's required on a 24/7, then at least between Monday to Saturday, what is the uptime in terms of percentage required? Is it 99.999 percentage? Or are you looking at 99.5 percentage? Or are you looking at 99.9999 percentage? Because each one comes at a different cost. So you got to agree with them. What is the uptime committed at a cost? Number two, the response time. When there is a problem comes in, you log in from the time you log in a request until the time the request is addressed, solved, the problem is solved. How much is the time? That's agreed with them. So they are also going to come at a cost. If it's a premium service, then you look at it on a 24/7 any day, then it's going to come at a different cost. So they can say now high critical problems, I would solve it in 4 hours time. Moderately critical problems, I would solve it in 2 hours time. I'm sorry, 12 hours time. Less critical problems, I will solve it in 40 hours time. So each one is going to come at a cost, but now they are all required to be documented and agreed in the form of a service level. So that's the very important component as far as service is concerned. Fine. Let's understand what a project is and what a process is. The difference between these two. Now let's take, for instance, that you are into a project where you're going to do the testing of user acceptance testing, right? For an American client for a credit card system. Okay. A team of about 100 people involved, and this project is required to go from April 23 to August 23. There's a specific time frame which is done, and there's 100 resources, and it's a manual testing. Okay, and you are required to use the tools for test management. When I say tools for test management means from the time you log in the defects until the time the defects are fixed by the client and retested, everything becomes online using a tool. Fine. Now, is this unique for people who are going to do the project from a customer's side, and you understand customer is offering you this project? Is it a unique project? Yes, it's a unique project. If it's unique, then it's a project. Otherwise, it's not a project at all. Okay. What's unique? No repetition happens here. Okay. No two projects that you undertake will have the same objective, will have the same activities to be conducted. So a project is said to be a project only when it's unique. Now, will you experience a complexity in this project? You might experience a complexity. I've experienced so many complexities. The complexities could be when the moment you get into the application, understand the scope, the UAT becomes, it's not just one application, that the customer says that there are 7 different other applications which are interfacing or interconnected. So that's a complexity 1. The complexity 2 is that when you get to the project, you understand that the project is required to be delivered to 24 different countries, and at least about 10 different countries in which the customer representative who talks to you do not know English at all. There's a complexity. So project is a complex, non-routine, one-time effort. The effort is here now between April to August. So a complex, non-routine, one-time effort limited by time, which has got limited by time, budget, in terms of the number of resources, in terms of the customer might tell you it's a fixed cost project for this period at $1 million. And this team will also have a specific fund approved for spending as well. And it is required to meet the performance specification as defined by the customer as well. So in this case, the performance specification could be all the applications along with its integrated APIs. The most critical test cases that you are designing must be met, and 99% of the test cases should pass. Could be a performance specification. I said 99% of the most critical test cases on the most critical software functionalities alone, right? So when you look at project, it's unique and it is planned endeavor. When I say planned, now it's between April to August. and with only 100 resources, only UAT. And each resource, what they are supposed to do, then you draw up a bigger plan, activity wise. Each activity shall be assigned to one person. Each activity can carry a start date and end date. It has got a specific time frame, right? It requires a finite set of resources. As I explained to you, it is something which has got interdependent activities. Now, the same example that I was just quoting UAT for the credit card application. If this project has to get commenced, the first thing what you got to do, you got to understand the scope of the project, right? There is a scoping. Once you understand the scope, then you got to get into the training on the application. First of all, you need to understand what the application, the domain related training of what this application is all about. Then you got to test the readiness of the test bed. Then you got to have the plan for your test cases, which is test planning, then data planning, then execution. So if you look at it, they're all connected together. Can you conduct the execution without no test cases being there? Can you complete your test cases without the data values are being available to you? So they're all interconnected one to one. There is an interdependency. There's a precedence of the previous activity to get over for the next activity to get started. There is a degree of uncertainty always. What's the degree of uncertainty? Nothing is going to be 100% as per what you planned. Okay, you might have started evaluating 0-day checking, and the environment should be so ready to go. The moment you log in, the customer training starts. The person who's giving you training from other side must speak Japanese language, and you become perplexed. That's an uncertainty, right? You start your test case preparation, you are going to load it onto the test tool. The tool is not working at all, an uncertainty. And on the 10th day of the project, since you started, 40% of the team members are reporting that they are infected by COVID. There is an uncertainty. The execution starts the day one. You find 20 high critical defects. Without fixing those defects, the next activity cannot get started. Uncertainty. So if something has to be called as a project, it has to meet all these criteria. One is that it's a project. Now, whatever you do, since I've taken a simple example of the testing project, I have narrated what could be the various characteristics that would qualify this as a project. Now, on the contrary, what is a process? A process is where you must be able to follow a documented set of rules or activities that would drive you to achieve the project objectives. So process is set of activities that will tell you how a particular activity will have to be done. So they are sequentially documented. Let's say now in this case, you need to follow a process to achieve the software UAT test planning. Now, what is the test planning here? Test planning refers to, first of all, you need to have a test strategy. Now you're doing a UAT, that's fine. But are we doing a manual or are we doing an automated? Number one. Number two, are we using the test cases or are we using end-to-end scenarios and then test cases and scripts? Are we simulating data from your environment, or is customer willing to give you a pseudo information and data which can be embedded? But these are all required to be documented, and that can drive you. Yes, okay, we are only going to do a test cases, but we have a business analyst who's going to write the end-to-end scenario. But how do you write a scenario? How do you write a test case? You need to have a guideline which should tell you point number one. Understand the functionalities which are under the scope for UAT. Number two, look for the functionality that is assigned to you as an engineer. Number three, for the functionality that is assigned, go through screen wise how many fields are available. Number four, for the screen that you are looking at, pick up the test cases template and understand the test scenarios for that particular screen based test scenarios that have been designed by your analyst. For the scenario, for each of the scenario, write test cases in this template, and each test case should follow the following naming nomenclature. Every test case should also contain the data and the expected outcome. This is a process. Without the process, you will not be able to showcase what is that you are doing to a customer. So process becomes extremely important, right? So you have understood what is the project, you understood what is the process as well. Now, in a very simpler way, you are into MTech program. You are writing a term paper is a project. Okay, because it contains multiple activities, as I explained to you, many interdependencies. It has got a specific time. There is an uncertainty as well. You do not know when you are going to log into quiz 1, the system is not responding to you, or you might feel sick as well. Taking a class notes, you are preparing a coffee in the morning. They're all not project. They're all repetitive activities. Okay, but now if you extend this, you completing your MTech program, MTech will be a program. So that's the difference between a project, program, and routine activity. Okay, but we will see now the program will have not just multiple projects. There has to be a common thread, right? Let's say now you manage one project as a project manager for a client. For a client, you are a project manager for a particular project. The project that I've just explained to you is a UAT for one of the banking. Okay, but now you will also be a program manager when for the same client or an account manager, all those projects that are planned and delivered to the same client under the domain BFSI for all the testing where as a project manager, you must be able to have the authority of interchanging resources. Then it becomes a program. All right, fine. IT infrastructure projects, there are multiple. Now, what all could be, IT infrastructure projects? You want to design a data center. Then it's a project under IT infrastructure. You want to design the network infrastructure and cabling, which is an IT infrastructure project. You want to migrate from Oracle DB, Oracle 11 to Oracle 14. It's a project. You want to commission the Microsoft Dynamics ERP. It's a project. You want to institutionalize storage area network for automated storage of information. Fine. You want to set up client-based networks for all the projects. It's a project. So there are multiple projects which could be considered as IT infrastructure projects, including the software development. You want to develop an in-house software, in-house development of a timesheet. Okay. So there are multiple projects. What is very important you need to understand is when those infrastructure projects that are designed and executed, you got to look at two sides. One, who's my internal customer and who's my external customer. The binding and who's the service providers. So the binding between these three is your SLA. Okay, fine. So what is the process? I've explained to you in detail, but now these are terminologies which are interchangeably used. Method, methodology, life cycle, system, technique, technology. A process is the only differentiator you will be able to showcase it to the customer in a service environment, because you're not making any design of a product which you'll be able to show it at a different level. So a process is something which can only be a differentiator. Okay. Now, some of the softer process models, a waterfall is a model, agile is a model, DevOps is a model, but these models can provide you some directions on for doing a software project, you need to have a specification, and you need a specification should include documentation of a BRS and SRS, and you need to have a phase called design and implementation where the software architecture must also be documented. Then You need to validate. You need to have a phase called validation, which is your testing. Then evolution, implementation, and maintenance. Now, these are all a model can provide you some directions using which you can design your own processes. Okay, fine. Eventually, software process model is an abstract representation because what you think is going to become final outcome deliverable is only a thinking, is a conceptual model. So then it's called an abstract representation. Unless you complete it and finally on the screen you are able to see, oh, is that what we are looking at? Is that what we have documented in the BRS? Are we meeting it? You don't know. That's the only reason it's called an abstract representation. Okay, let's move on to standards, frameworks, and models. Very clearly, you need to understand the differences here. Very, very clearly, because you should be able to speak that language across to your customers internally with your colleagues and so on. Okay, but the most foundation is that the software engineering practices. Look at the software engineering by Dr. Pressman. Right? Software engineering will give you the knowledge of what are the various software development models. What are the practices that you'll have to look at it? What are the test mechanisms that you got to look for it? Okay, what are the other improvement models that you can invoke? So that's a foundation upon which the software project management works. Now, if you were to establish the uniqueness with the customers, the software quality management, which is your process, can help you to demonstrate the capability of your organization with the customers. And you must be able to take a large pride as a project manager when you are able to demonstrate this. That's the only reason why you got to understand the terminologies, these terminologies quite well. Fine. Now, when we are talking about a plan-driven approach and an agile approach, now plan-driven approach is typically the oldest software development models like waterfall, and the modified version of waterfall is a view process. They're all plan-driven approach. In contrast is the agile or scrum model. Now, how they are actually differentiated? Look at it. Plan-driven models are very, very rigid in terms of without completing one phase, you will not be able to move to the other phase. When you look at a waterfall model, where unless the complete requirements are documented in the form of a business requirement specification, you would not be able to move to the next level where the architectural specification for non-functional requirements should be documented. Unless that is documented and signed off, you would not be able to move to the conceptual design. Unless conceptual design is not completed, you would not be able to move to the development. Unless development is completed, you will not be able to move towards testing. And so every stage, it calls for a standard set of documentation without which it is not going to move to the next level. On the contrary, we process a slightly adjusted model where it helps you to plan some of the activities in parallel. But anyway, they are all very rigid and highly plan-driven approaches. But today, business cannot wait so long. Gone are the days where the customer can always know, has told you that it's fine. But today you will not be able to go and speak to the customers as a project manager that I need about 14 months time for developing and delivering this project. You will not get the project. Things are moving. Even the business, you don't know in 2 years time, new businesses are evolved and then it is getting close in 2 years. So there has got to be an agility. There has got to be flexibility. There has got to be an incremental version of the software, which includes a waterfall model into it. But in the incremental model, once in every 2 to 6 weeks time, you are able to showcase to the customer a fully usable or partially usable software that only works. But there is nothing right or wrong. Each model is a model by itself. Each model has got its own advantages, disadvantages. But as a project manager, you got to weigh based on the culture in which you are working, the culture in which you are undertaking a project as well. Fine. Now, plan-driven waterfall is a plan-driven, as I explained to you. When will you use waterfall model? Now, it's a waterfall because it goes through every stage. And unless every stage is completed, signed off, it doesn't go to next level. Stage 1 requirement, stage 2 design, stage 3 testing, stage 4 implementation, stage 5 verification, and stage 6 maintenance. So it flows from top to down, and other way around is not possible. It is possible as a project manager, you need to understand that waterfall, the highly plan driven model, can be applied to organizations where you've got extremely well documented BRS, SRS, and architecture. If they are all available, well documented, and larger projects you can apply. Otherwise, you have to look at iterative, prototype, or agile models. Why agile became so famous? When you talk about agile, there are only two things that you got to understand. One, it is flexible. What does it mean? You can stop the project at any point of time. The moment the customer and the team decides that I think it's not going to work, we are building too much. So it's flexible. Number two, it's adaptive to changes. Any changes that are required to be performed, unlike in waterfall model, you are able to accommodate changes because the agile methods are going to use something called a sprint. Every sprint you decide only X number of user stories that would be built, but I'm going to give you a workable software in every 4 weeks or 6 weeks, in which the customer is also involved on a day-to-day activity. There is a feedback from the customer which gets taken into consideration, and your project is moving as per that. So that's why it's adaptive. But in an old model, the scope is fixed. In a traditional model, waterfall, BRS is fixed. The scope is fixed. On the contrary, the cost and time is a variable. Okay. Now, based on the number of people whom you have deployed, you will either complete the project in 8 months' time, or you will tell the customer that I need another 4 months' time extra. You will tell the customer that the cost is, if I deploy 10 people for work for 5 days, 8 hours, the cost is so much. The customer says, no, I wanted all people to work for 7 days, then you're going to increase the cost as well. So these two are variable from a waterfall perspective. But on the contrary, when you look at agile approach is very different. Your customer is going to tell you the cost and time. I'm sorry, you have to develop and deliver a workable product in 6 months' time. So time is fixed. Customer tells you, I'll give you 1 million USD. These two are fixed. What is changing? Scope is dynamically changed. Scope can dynamically change. That's an advantage of adaptation to an agile model. Scope, you can accept a scope change any day because every day it is getting discussed. You don't need to wait for a comprehensive business requirement specification to be documented because you are only looking at the user stories. Fine. Now, what is the difference between a standard and framework? Very important. So there are multiple standards which are available. Internationally recognized ISO, International Organization for Standardization. Now, let's say now there is a standard called ISO 9001, which is a quality management system standard. What does it tell you? When you say your company is certified for ISO 9001 to a customer, your company practices have been evolved, implemented, complied to the requirements as stated by this standard. The standard, when you say ISO, International Organization for Standardization, the standard specifies some of the requirements that need to be understood, interpreted, processed to be designed, implemented by the organization to demonstrate to the external third-party auditors who are going to come and evaluate how far are you nearer to the expectations of the standard, and they certify you. It does not force you to follow any specific method. That's a standard. They are all standards. If you look at it, they are written in two different languages. One, shall language, other one is called a will language. The requirements stated by the standard, if it is shall, which means it is mandatory. If it is will, then it is only a recommendatory. So no standard will enforce you on a specific method. For example, in ISO 9001 standard, if you take, there is a clause called continuous improvement. Continuous improvement shall be done by the organizations based on the known methods or methods shall be um, which shall be procured from an outside. So what is the continuous improvement? Whatever you've done last month and 1 quarter, if you've done a project, project A, you've done a project, for a client, in testing project in a banking industry, and for the same industry, you're doing another project. The more and more knowledge that you're gaining, you need to improve. 6 months time you have taken for a project A, next project you should be able to complete in 4 months time. So that's an improvement. Now, improvement could be done through multiple models. If you work with GE, there's a model called Six Sigma. If you supply to GE will ensure that all your project improvements go through the Six Sigma model. Six Sigma refers to there is a method called DMAIC: define, measure, analyze, improve, control. So every problem that is required to be solved, every improvement opportunity that is required to be addressed will have to be addressed only through the DMAIC, which is a method. This method is different from a standard. This method you can download the method from wherever the knowledge is available. You can tailor it to your own organization. Okay, but standard requirements you have no authority to change anything there. Okay, and it could also be standard on ISO 20000, which is a IT service standard. It could also be standard on ISO 27001, which is a information security management system standard. All these standards, when you are certified, you can go to the customer and show them that our company is already certified against these standards, which demonstrates that we are a process-driven company, independently audited and certified by us. Now, what is a framework? Framework can provide you guidance to develop processes for a given domain. For example, CMMI is a framework. This is software development maturity model. This cannot be applied to any other company, any other industry. It's only for a software company. Now, what does it mean? This is a framework which defines the external audit community which will be engaged to evaluate your organizational software development process maturity based on the CMMI framework recommended checklist. So there are 1 to 5 different stages maturity, 1 being low level maturity, 5 being high level maturity. So that's a framework. Okay. ITIL is a framework. ITIL is a framework which has got 8 different books. These 8 different books will have the best practices to be followed for managing IT processes. So I would actually discuss about it when we discuss about ITIL this. Okay. So now you know what a process is, right? You know what a process is, what a project is. You've also understood what an IT infrastructure, what are the IT infrastructure processes are. And you also now understood what are the standards, what are frameworks, and what are models. Okay. Why agile is quite important. Okay, now let's look at what are the choice of development models. The choice when you undertake a role as an IT manager, there are 2 choices. One, you can build a software, or you can outsource it. Okay, but now the building or outsourcing, whether you want to build in-house or you want to outsource it, but you need to have certain models to be followed, right? The model can be, as I just portrayed, it could be a waterfall model, or it could be a prototyping or an iterative approach, or it could be an incremental model. But if it's going to be in-house development, then these models will be dictated by your superiors. But if you're going to do it outsourcing, then if the outsourced vendor has got their own model, then you got to tell them, Arey Baba, we are comfortable only with this model. You better tune this model, your model, based on the model that I'm going to recommend. But today's scenario is that agile methods are highly preferred. That's what we got to look at. Why agile methods are getting highly preferred is what you need to understand. Now, you building or buying, both has got advantages and disadvantages. Now, pros and cons of, so now you don't need to build or just buy the package. Let's say now the typical, today you got software as a service on many things. Okay. You've got no customer relationship management software. You've got marketing software. Okay. You've got HRMS portal available. You need only buy licenses. You have, it's a model which means hosted available as a software as a service. Okay. Now, what are the advantages? Even ERP, if you look at it, ERP services, be it SAP or Oracle, they are available as a hosted service. You got to only decide the scope. If you're into manufacturing, now are you into continuous manufacturing or a discrete manufacturing? Continuous manufacturing is a process based. Discrete manufacturing is assembled. Now I need a scope where I have a discrete manufacturing. I'm going to have assemble. Now car manufacturing plant is only assemble, and I have an assembling station. I wanted purchase. I wanted sales. I wanted marketing. No, I wanted finance. I wanted a warehouse. I wanted delivery to my customers, invoicing, collection. If all are required to be done into the scope, then you will have to tell the service provider this is the scope required. They can map the scope and then give you the licenses for you to start operating. So if you're buying a packaged product, the biggest advantage is that you don't need to wait for it. The best practices which are already available, and they have to just configure and give it to you. Otherwise, if you're going to build it internally, you will wait until the time the testing is done, and you don't have the expertise of doing a testing comprehensively. On the contrary, this is a model. When you buy the off-shelf packaged products, it is already proven, so you don't need to worry about it. The only disadvantage I see is you can always say that when I wanted some customization, can it be done? Why do you need a customization? That question is to be asked. But it is always a call to be taken based on what is the need business needs. Okay. Okay, before you decide which model, software development model that you wanted, there are three important parameters that you need to consider as a project manager. One, examine the risk and uncertainties. Now, what is the risk that you will have to evaluate here? Do you have the requirements for the software very detailed, documented, understood by all the business stakeholders? And are you convinced that the technology that you are going to use it is not going to change for the next 3-4 years time to come in until the time we deploy the model? Point number two, or parameter two, analyze the type of application being built. Is it an application that is for exchanging information? It could be ERP. It's not falling under the category of information system. It could be HRMS, which is information transfer. It could be marketing. They're all information system only. Or is it an embedded system? Let's say now embedded system could be a mobile device, an embedded system application which goes into mobile, or it could be embedded system in medical devices like X-ray machines, where X-ray machine has got an X-ray tube, and the property of the tubes will have to be managed between various different modules. It can have an embedded system when the X-ray is let's say you fell down and you are being taken to a diagnostic laboratory where your hand has to be scanned to find out whether there is a crack. Fine. When you are scanned, there is an X-ray ray which is emitted. These rays are required to be it's only dots. When the rays are emitted, they are only illuminated dots. These dots are required to be collated for an image, which is being done by an embedded system. Or you got to look at how critical they are. You are going to build a software for launch of a new rocket or airplane system. They are all extremely critical. Then you can decide, okay, I'm not going to outsource it. I'm going to build it internally. And you also need to understand what is the difference between my target environment, wherein the final application would be hosted, where is my test environment, and where is my development environment? That can also be considered to decide on what is the software model. And third one is, are there any specific customer requirements? Some of the customer might tell you that if I'm being a part of that software that you're going to build in, I only prefer an agile method. Or you also will have to look at it, the regulatory requirements as well. Some of the regulations in other countries, there are statutory bodies which keeps changing the tax on the service and products every once in 3 months time. So you need to take this also into consideration while you are looking at a model, because you cannot keep on changing the code once every 3 months. Fine. Now, between the structured development and speed is possible only with agile. Okay, because agile provides you the speed for the reason that once in every 4 to 6 weeks, usable software is delivered. And that's possible because it uses a rapid application development, and the methodology is Scrum or XP. XP is extreme programming. Okay, or it could be paired programming as well. But we will discuss about Scrum a little more detail. But if it is structured approach, we call it as heavyweight models. Why it's heavyweight? Because there is so much of dependency on documentation. The models like your waterfall or V model, both uses detailed documentation. But now, perhaps the technology that you might always use in that is, it could be a UML. or it could be the model-driven approach MDA, or it could be UML supplemented with object constraint language as well, or press the button and application code generated. That's coming up quite extensively today. Right? There are MLA based algorithms where you only provide input design of the software. It can give you the coding as well. That extent we have moved forward. But if you look at it, Agile is a model that has led to, waterfall is a model that has led to Agile. Why? Now, in the waterfall model imposes a very strict structured approach, right? I do feasibility study, then I move to user requirement. I complete user requirement, then I move to analysis. I complete analysis, then I move to system design. I complete system design, then move to program design. Once program design is completed, I will take up coding. When coding is done, then I'll do the testing. When testing is done, I do the operation, implementation. But at every stage, it's a stage by stage, but you cannot go back from here to here, not possible at all. Which means at this testing time, if customer wanted a change in a waterfall model, it is absolutely not possible. That's why it's called a waterfall. The water flows from top to down. Okay. On the contrary, because of the limitation in terms of the iterative approach, which is not enunciated by the waterfall model, the V model is a shift from waterfall model. V model also uses structured approach. On the contrary, it makes a little more flexible by virtue of making it iterative, meaning when you perform requirements, you also decide on the acceptance testing. When you do the specification for your software, you also decide on the system testing in parallel. So the only difference between waterfall and V model is a V model is something where there are quite a few activities in resemblance. They are parallelly decided. So from waterfall, we moved to V model. That was much better. Then we moved into incremental model. Now in an incremental model, you are going to commit to the customer that the requirements, we call it as the software business requirement, which is BRS, or software business requirement is BR. The software requirements are broken down into doable certain percentage. So in an increment model, increment 1, you will take up the high critical requirements to the extent of 10% of the BRS. 10% of the BRS will be taken in increment 1 and delivered to the customer to showcase that this is how this is going to come in. Then you move on to incremental model 2, increment 2. In increment 2, you take up additionally another 10 to 15% of the business requirement. Okay. Then increment 3, another 10%. So you do the development and deliver in terms of increment. That's the third stage that we moved on. Then today it's only agile. Today, predominantly agile. Why? Because agile is time boxed, deadline based. For the reason that once every 4 to 6 weeks, you deliver a workable product. That's the idea. The theme of agile is you must be able to deliver workable, partially or fully workable product once in every 4 to 6 weeks. How is it possible? How is it possible? Now I'll give you a very simple example that you and me would be using a high-end mobiles. Maybe I must be using a low-end mobile. You guys are software techies. You must be using a high-end mobile. When we buy this mobile, look at the number of mobile applications that are installed. Right when you unlock the device, there are plenty, 40, 50 mobile applications that are coming in. How many applications you use? Hardly 2, hardly 3. So what happens to the rest of the applications? So which means the traditional model of software building using waterfall, its reliance heavily on the complete documentation of the business requirements is no longer valid. It's not possible because you are going to build all those which are not required as well. Business cannot provide you what is required for the next 2 years' time as well. Business cannot think. That's not their job. As a result, you build all those unwanted and you're not going to use it as well. And agile is going to enforce you to prioritize the requirements that are needed to be incorporated in sprint 1, sprint 2, sprint 3 based on a priority. The most essential requirement for the business, build it first. It uses something called a Moscow priority. The Moscow refers to A, must have. Without these features, business cannot work. Build it in sprint 1. Should have. Very important, but it can work for some time without being there. So this can be, this is sprint 1. This is sprint 2. Could have. This is lovely to have. Okay. This is in sprint 3. And want. I would love to have this, but if business does not give me, I'm not bothered. This is sprint 4. But when you prioritize, you know, and the customers are getting involved at every stage, you pretty well know that the business is going to build only the most critical, which means the sprint 1 and sprint 2 itself, you would complete the 40 to 50% of the most essential requirement of the business. That's more than sufficient. Don't build those requirements which are not at all needed. Could have, want, wishes, cannot become a part of your software, right? Okay, now what is the formula for you to decide? This is very important for you. What is the formula for you to decide on which model of the software would you be using? Would you recommend the waterfall? Would you recommend iterative? Would you recommend prototyping? Would you recommend V model, or would you recommend agile? Which one would you prefer? Very important. Your questions would be based on this only. Okay. Now look at point number 1. If uncertainty is very, very high, then your decision 1 is use agile. What is uncertainty? Customer themselves, they do not know what the requirements are. You do not know how the technology is going to change. You start development today, but the technology is going to completely change now in about 3 months time. Then use only agile, because you got quickly, you can come back by virtue of the model provides you flexibility. You can come back and stop the project. Point number 2, if complexity is high, but uncertainty is not. Complexity is high, but uncertainty is not. The complexity is that you'll have to build a software which is going to further talk to 10 different applications, and it also has to process tremendous amount of terabytes and petabytes of data which needs to be downloaded from a satellite. So highly complex. But you have uncertainty 0, which means the customer has documented requirements very clearly. Then what you do? Because complexity is very high, do not go in for an agile based approach because uncertainty is very low. You recommend an incremental model or prototyping model. That's your decision 2. Now decision 3. Uncertainty and complexity both are very low, but this is a very idealistic situation. Okay, very idealistic situation. And both are low. Go with waterfall. That's it. Or sometimes you may have to look at cultural parameters where the customers are ignorant. They don't even know what software is all about unless completely documented and take their signature. You don't move into that. Okay, so that's a waterfall model. Now, this is your decision 3. Decision 4. If the timelines are very, very stringent, okay, very tight, only use evolutionary or agile. Because agile can tell you, right, how many critical, agile can help you to deliver the business critical items within the time frame that's agreed, wherein you must be able to churn out at least about 10 to 15 the user stories, which is going to be, which will replace the fundamental BRS. Okay, fine. Agile methods. What is the motivation? So motivation I've already explained to you, because you don't use every feature. Okay, in a software, a research has very clearly identified that only 20% of the software features are used regularly by the employees. 45% of the software features are not used at all. Another 30% of them very rarely used or sometimes used. So why to build it? So there needs to be a complete change in approach. That's why Agile came in. Now, the IT projects globally, 35% of the projects failed. 20% cancelled. 45% of the projects, they were challenged because of poor quality or absence of functionalities or running over budget or running over time. So there is essential need to refocus where you need to move from the traditional model to a new model. That's one reason why the transformation from your waterfall model through incremental, through this is prototyping. So it is typically the evolution that is happening, which is to meet the business requirements. When the entire business is changing, you cannot have comfortably waterfall model can meet all this. It's not going to meet. Now, as a result, the ability of the agile projects in terms of accepting, adapting changes required on the go has materialized very well, and customers are demanding to have agile methodology. Okay. So in agile methodology, if you look at it, the comparison, if you look at waterfall one after other, right? One after other. On the contrary, in agile, this is sprint. Sprint 1, sprint 2, sprint 3, sprint 4, this is sprint 5. Every sprint, you will have a usable software. In each sprint, the entire waterfall model is built in. Each sprint is built in because there is a requirement, there is a design, there is a development, there is a testing, and there is integration, there is implementation. So that's how it become very, very popular. So the agile promotes working software at any stage, and that's converted into sprints, right? And every sprint should have 4 to 6 weeks. Some customers says it's 2 to 6 weeks. Each sprint will have to be delivered. A sprint is an iteration. Okay. Now, agile can help in de-risking upfront costs. Why and how? Today, entrepreneurs, now when you want to have an idea to start a business, let's say you want to come out with a mobile application which can connect all the government land related websites where customer who wanted to find out whether their land has got all the documents. Okay, but no, the government has got 200 websites across India. So you wanted to compile all of them into one mobile application. Right. It's a business idea. Whether this business idea workable or not, you'll have to go and do a testing, right? But will you take 1.5 years time to complete the entire mobile application and then go to the market and find out whether this idea is going to work or not? You'll be thrown out by then. You would have unnecessarily spent the whole money and you would have become bankrupt as well. On the contrary, if you use an agile method, you can quickly have a miniaturized version of the mobile application in about just 6 weeks, 4 weeks time, and go to show the customer, is there customers available to me? Are customers interested? If customers are not interested, whatever the small amount of money that you have spent in the first 3 months time or 1.5 months time is alone the money that you have spent. Otherwise, in 1 year, you would have spent a lot of money and then finally you close down your factory. I know friends of mine who were known to me the earlier stages, in the Satyam saga, people who came out of Satyam, they know a couple of clients, from whom they got the project and they wanted to run a software development company and software service company. They started offices, full-fledged no offices with about 50 people. They were not able to last beyond even 1 year because you never knew what the business that you wanted to do it. So agile is something which is going to help you to iron out this risk, okay, and help the entrepreneurs to proactively go test whether this business is going to work or not. Primarily for the reason that it is very transparent. Transparent to the extent that the business, developer, the architect, tester, all of them know on a day-to-day basis what are all the user stories that you're working on, and customer comes and talks to you. You talk to the customer daily, so the communication is very clear. Customer feedback is taken on a daily basis, and it's a frequent inspection you do daily, and you are able to adapt in terms of accept new changes. And that was something which has helped the agile model to be proactive, to become very proactive, and it can de-risk the upfront cost. Fine. So accordingly, the project management style also changes. In agile, there is no project manager. Now you have a sprint. A sprint is an iteration, right? You got somebody, in a scrum, we will discuss about it. So you got a cross-functional team, okay, where there is a developer, there is a tester, there is an architect, okay, and there is a customer representative. This is the team which is going to work on the development. on a database, they're going to talk to each other, and there will be a Scrum Master. Okay, and there is a product owner. Okay, the Scrum Master will help you to understand the Scrum processes, and product owner is from a customer side. They facilitate you end to end until the product is rolled out. They're responsible, so you're going to talk to each other. So the project management approach itself is going to change completely. There is no bossy kind in Agile. On the contrary, in a traditional project management, there is a project manager who's a boss. There is no bossy here, right? Fine. So Agile, as I spoke to you, it's something where you deliver workable product and no surprise to the customer at the end. Fine. So going forward, Agile is something which will be a great thing to get adapted across the projects, but bear in mind those challenges that I spoke to you, the formula through which you'll have to decide what is the right model, company to company, culture to culture, geography to geography, the complexity of the software, right? All decides what is the model that you'll have to choose. But Agile is said to be going further stronger. Fine. The Agile, common Agile methods, if you look at it, Agile has got multiple, Agile is a framework, right? So there are multiple methodologies under which Scrum is one. Scrum is one framework. Extreme programming is another framework. Pair programming model is another framework. The DSDM, Dynamic System Development Method, is another framework. Feature-driven development is another method. Rational Unified Process is another method. But now we are going to only talk about Scrum is something which is very popular, wide adapted. Others are that extensively not followed. So we need not have to look at others. Others are models you'll have to just understanding. Extreme programming does not refer to go to the extreme. It refers to only the speed. Pair programming is always, in order to improve the speed, the recommendation is that you have a pair of a developer A plus developer B. Okay. Now the developer A will do the coding. Developer B will actually verify your code and do the cleansing wherever the code is not properly written and standardize it. So it is done always in a pair model. But now people only look at Scrum. Scrum is a model which is quite often adapted. But now there are customers who very jovially say that when you adopt an Agile method, there is no documentation required. Just what is now being projected by Scott Adams in this diagram, where the customer boss says, now we are going to adapt an Agile model, no documentation required. It is not so. It's not like that. Agile model promotes a flexibility in terms of the approach. It can take up any changes in the scope, but it provides you a workable software once in every 4 to 6 weeks. It does not say that we don't need a documentation. Documentation is a must everywhere. But it is not so rigid. You don't have a BRS, but you're going to build user stories in Agile. Okay. If you look at waterfall model is a nightmare. Why it is a nightmare? Let's say now this is the project size in x-axis. This is the requirement changes. The project size in terms of the function points, bigger the project size, then the requirement number of changes that are required will be also on the increase. Why it is so? Can anybody give me a reason? Size of the project is bigger and the requirement change also would be very, very high. I'll actually allow Abhijit. Any reason? Aditya, I've allowed your mic. Akila, Alan, on job. Are you guys there or not?
Yes, sir. Alan is here.
Any reason? When the project size is larger, the requirement changes stipulated by the customer will also go high. Any reason? From your side, what you have come across? So let's say what does it mean? A project size increases. This is 6 months, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year. Bigger the size, the number of requirement changes stipulated by the customer, asked by the customer, will increase from 10 to 50, 100,000. So a project which lasts 4 years for development would fetch 1,000 requests, change requests from the customer. Any reason why? The reason is this is to be derived from neuro-linguistic programming. As an individual, you and me can only speculate our requirement for the next 4 to 6 weeks time. If you're asked to go sit and list what are all the activities that you need to do for your family and for your job, you can only list it only for the next 4 weeks, beyond which you will not be able to do. That is the only reason why these projects have failed so bad. Agile, on the contrary, when Agile for every 4 to 6 weeks, one sprint is to be rolled out, it was made possible because humanly they can think only what is required for the next 4 weeks time. That's why it is. Got that? Fine. If you look at it, between iterative and incremental model, the absolute way to go, Agile is the way to go. So when you look at Agile, there are methodologies: Scrum, extreme programming, DSDM, future driven. But we are going to only focus on the Scrum method. Okay. But there are quite a few frameworks like Lean, unified processes, okay, Kanban, just in time. But the more popular is Scrum, so we will only look at Scrum. It can also be a test-driven development where the first you write down what is to be tested and use that as the input for you to develop. It could be feature-driven development as well, where the software features that are required, first you decide on that. Then it can be done. You can do the design of the software project based on the features. Okay. Now in a Agile framework, we call it as a sprint. A sprint is a language, the word which is taken from the marathon. So when somebody who runs a marathon, they run only in sprint. They want to run 50 miles. They don't run 50 miles at a stretch. They run in sprints. 5 miles, 1 milestone. Another 5 miles, 1 milestone. Each one is called a sprint. But in a sprint, if you look at it, the changes that are required to be done in a software diminishes over a period of time. If you look at it, this is the change, number of changes required. And this side is the time. As the time goes, let's say now the first 4 weeks sprint 1. Then next 4 weeks sprint 2. Third 4 weeks sprint 3. The first 4 weeks time, the change requirement could be slightly higher because the whole team needs to understand the entire methodology, and along with customer, they got to communicate with each other. So it will take time, little more time in the sprint 1. But when you move on to sprint 2, sprint 3, then it gets standardized. You will have almost 0 changes that are required, because then you would have established a good amount of a rapport with the customer. You would have understood the entire methodology well. It does not mandate you, force you to have so much of changes to be done, right? So perhaps the velocity in terms of the number of user stories that would be converted into software in sprint 1, maybe slightly lesser, could be a 4 user story. In sprint 2, it could be a 5 user story. And as you go along in sprint 3 and 4, you will reach 10 user stories as a velocity. Okay, fine. So Agile is risk driven. Agile is customer driven. Agile is iterative planning. That's where Agile becomes very popular. So what is a sprint? A sprint is an iteration. Every sprint is to be understood as an iteration in Agile. So an iteration is something where in 4 to 6 weeks time, you'd be able to deliver a usable, fully or partially usable software to the customer, whereby the requirements which are identified by the customer along with the team from the backlog of user stories, which are stamped to be high priority user stories, alone taken and delivered to the customer for implementation. That's called a sprint. So usable software once every 4 to 6 weeks, and it takes the high ordered, high priority user stories alone, interactive manner, and that's given where the customer provides you the feedback. That's a sprint. Okay. Now, an agile, because of the methodology I told you, you are going to take a feedback from the customer. So every sprint, this is a sprint 1, this is a sprint 2, where there is a interaction that happens on a day-to-day basis, where you're going to meet with the customer, tell the customer that what you have done yesterday, and the customer is going to tell you this is fine, this is not fine, there is a change required. So because there is a continuous interaction with the customer, Agile takes the customer feedback on a daily basis, and that is the only reason you are able to provide a usable software in a 4 to 6 weeks time. Fine. The common thread in Agile framework is that now simplicity. What is the meaning of simplicity here? Instead of a business requirement specification, a detailed document, you will only use a user story, which is pretty simple to understand. There is a feedback, which means you are talking to the customer on a daily basis through stand-up meetings with the customer and take the feedback of the customer on the user stories that are being worked on a daily basis. 3, transparent communication. As in, there is no project manager bossy kind of an approach where the cross-functional team, which is your developer plus tester plus architect and the product owner plus the customer representative, all of them know what developer is doing, what tester is doing, and what architect's doing, and what are the input provided by the product owner, and what is happening on a daily basis. So communication is very transparent. Now this can actually lead to courageous software team. Because why it is courageous? Because you are getting into a zone which is not known. So the team would actually, when the team takes up the courageous act, the involvement will be very high, because human being, we all need to do things differently. When there is a challenge, we are up for the challenge. And so these are the threads. There is the respect for everybody in this team, because it's not a bossy kind. Fine. Now, projects with agile frameworks. The projects can follow Scrum, Kanban, Lean, Extreme Programming, Crystal development framework, dynamic system development, future-driven development, but we will focus only on Scrum. Okay, Scrum is what we're going to look at it. The other methodologies, just to for your information, more of a knowledge check, is Lean. This is a Japanese word. See, when I was working for a manufacturing company, when I started my career, went to Japan to the Toyota production systems. These are all words which are used by methods which are used by manufacturing units. Lean refers to eliminate waste. Now, what is waste in software? If you recollect the example that I've been talking to you, in a traditional software model, you build so many software features unnecessarily. Ultimately, what percentage of the features are used? Only 20%. So why to build so many features which are not required? To eliminate waste is Lean. Kanban system is called a bin system. Now, what does it mean is, when you create a bin 1, bin 2, bin 3, bin 4, each bin will be provided only with whatever is possible for you to deliver that day and that week. See, let's say now this is a bin 1, this is bin 2, this is bin 3, bin 4, bin 5. Now you will only have, let's say, 4 user stories that is required to be completed as a software, deliverable software in 4 weeks time. That alone you will have. Then from here, developer, how many user stories they have completed, will go to bin 2. How many has gone to tester? That will go to bin 3. So every bin you will know what is available in stock, so that just in time, whatever stocks that are required to be delivered here for the next sprint alone will be delivered. Okay. So that's how the terminology from Toyota production system, Kanban and Lean have come out. Fine. Now, extreme programming is adding speed, but it has got Lean as the framework. Lean uses agile methodology. Agile invokes Scrum, and Scrum can use the extreme programming. They're all related like that. Nothing beyond that. You don't need to confuse. Okay. Okay. Extreme programming is something where speed is added. One of the popular technique is that paired programming, which I've explained to you. Okay. Now let's look at Scrum. In Scrum, there are 3 important roles. One is a Scrum Master. Scrum Master is a person who will educate the entire team on what the Scrum approach is. the cross-functional team, which will have a combination of developer, designer, tester, and operations. Okay. Then there is somebody who's called a product owner. That person is responsible mainly from a customer side, end-to-end development. Now, what happens is in Scrum method, the first you are going to create a backlog. Now, what is a product backlog? The number of user stories. Here it is not the software project specification or BRS. You will have user stories. All the user stories are designed, documented, and it is kept as a product backlog. The team, along with the product owner, they decide from the backlog of the users stories that are available. See, each user story is a software feature. That's all. Now they decide, and the customer provides you the priority for the user story by virtue of assigning a business value, a number. The business value will be something between 1 to 25. So a user story which is assigned with a business value of 25 is a high priority. So for a sprint one, only high priority user stories will be taken, and that would be put as a sprint block. So it could be priority 25, 24, 23, 22. 4 user stories might be taken, and that will be run into sprint one to develop, test, and deliver. At the end of the now, while the activities are happening for sprint one, every day there is a meeting with the customer. And every day you communicate to the customer, this is what I'm doing. It is that correct? Is there a correction required? Correction is implemented immediately there itself. And you deliver end of the 4 weeks a usable software. And retrospectively, you decide at the end of a sprint one, how many user stories that in the master from where you have translated into sprint block, how many is balanced? And from there, do we need to go to sprint two? Customer can decide. How many further critical business required the user stories are required to go into sprint two. That's an advantage. That's how the Scrum works. Okay. So the core characteristics of Agile, I explained to you that it's a time box. There's a continuous feedback. There's a direct involvement of all the stakeholders. There's a constant communication, and you use an Agile method. Scrum is the common Agile framework used, and if you know that, that's more than sufficient. Fine. Okay. Then we come into the Prince2. So Prince2 is a certification. I want you to understand this is a certification. Let's say you want to become a software project manager. Okay. When you want to become a software project manager, either you will have to do a PMI certification. PMI is a Project Management Institute certification, or Prince2 certification. Now, what is the difference between these two? A PMI is a certification which is offered by US. Prince2 is a certification which is offered by UK. The Government of Commerce in UK, they were earlier driving it, but now it is given outsourced. It is now given it to them. Now, if you see that your future is a software project manager and you're going to handle only use-based clients, go with getting a PMI certification. Okay. Today it is everything is online, but it would take at least about 6 months time. Okay. Because there are 10 domains in which you will have to acquire knowledge that will be taught to you, including templates, to manage the entire software project. And finally, you write the exam and then get certified. Same way Prince2, there are fundamental differences. If you think that your customers are going to be, you are going to become a project manager, but your customers are more from UK, then you do the Prince2 certification. That's the only difference. Okay. So that is the only difference. You need a methodology. Methodology is a book of knowledge. The book of knowledge is available only when you go and do the certification. The book of knowledge is possible for you to acquire. If you have the book of knowledge, you can transmit to the entire team which is working in the project, and you can establish clear transparency, methodology, improve the maturity of the entire processes. That is why you need a project management methodology. Okay. So this I explained to you the difference between a Prince and PMBOK. PMBOK is the PMI. PMBOK is being managed, being offered by Project Management Institute of US. PMBOK refers to Project Management Book of Knowledge, right? So these two are certifications. Now, earlier it was managed, by Prince2 was managed by the Government of Commerce, UK. Now they have given it to Axelos, a company called Axelos, right, which is an APM group. They offer you this certification. Fine. But typically, what happens is, in a PMBOK, which means the Project Management System certification, the project is divided into 5 phases. initiation, planning, execution, controlling, closing. Now, if you do the certification, they will teach you how to go about conducting initiation phase of project. What are the various templates and checklists that are required to be used? How to go about conducting planning stage? What are the best practices and templates that are required to be used, including checklist? So that knowledge is being taught to you when you do the certification. Okay, but the PMBOK as well as Agile can coexist together, because for delivery only you are going to include Agile as a methodology. Now, there are various terminologies that we have spoken. Now we need to look at these terminology refer to what. See, there is a theme, there is a principle, there is a process, there is standard. We have seen all that. Now, waterfall is a method, right? It's a model. Where does it fit in? It fits into process. Scrum, Kanban, it's a method, model. It fits into where? Process. Prince 2 is a project management certification. So it spreads from theme, goes through principle and up to processes, because it also teaches you processes. PMI based PMBOK, it is a collection of processes and some standards. Lean is a theme. Agile is a principle. So that's the difference that you need to understand. So if you look at Prince and PMBOK, a project is defined in Prince more from a customer angle. A business case is what customer defines. On the contrary, the PMBOK defines project as a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product, service, or result. So Prince 2 looks more aligned towards customer. On the contrary, PMBOK is not so aligned towards the customer. It is aligned more towards the processes. Project management is defined in Prince 2 as the planning, delegating, monitoring, and control of all aspects of the project, and the motivation of those involved to achieve the project objectives within the expected performance target of time, cost, quality, scope, benefits, and risks. On the contrary, PMBOK says project management is application of knowledge, skill, tools, techniques to project activities to meet the project requirements. See, both are fine. You need only see how Prince 2 defines a project, how PMBOK defines a project, how Prince 2 defines project management, how PMBOK defines a project management. But UK loves, European market loves Prince 2, US loves PMI. So you need to take a call whether you want to become certified with Prince 2 or you want to become certified with PMBOK based on your tuning to become project management with zone. Okay. So these are the differences very clearly. Forget about number of pages, but both actually, discusses risk, both framework discusses, communication, both framework discusses. Now, PMBOK is more on human resources and stakeholders management. On the contrary, the Prince is more towards customer organization. Okay. PMBOK integrates the various processes, but here Prince is a combined version of process, themes, and change. Okay. Scope, time, and cost is discussed in both cases, because scope, time, and cost it's also addressed in the business case. Okay. Quality is looked at from both dimensions. If you look at a project project life cycle has got 5 different phases. Okay, that's what both defines: initiation, planning, execution, monitoring, control, closing. So these are the 5 different phases of any project, be it software project or anything. But if you happen to undertake the PMBOK certification, it comprehensively discusses 10 knowledge areas that are required for any project manager. That includes integration management, scope management, time management, cost management, quality management, HR, communication, risk, procurement, and stakeholder. Each domain you will be taught on what is required, what are the best practices and templates, checklists that are required. These would probably each one you take not less about 10 hours session. So anything between 100 to 140 hours you will learn and then go through multiple exams to get yourself certified for PMI. But if you look at the time taken, initiation, if you look at now, this is your phases. This is your phase and this is your time. Okay, you put that phases. This is your time. A planning phase, initiation phase will take lesser time. On the contrary, execution, if you look at this is execution. Execution takes so much of time. Look at it. Execution normally takes a lot of time and closure can take some time. Fine. The Prince2 methodology, if you look at Prince2 methodology has got 7 bar 7 bar 7, which is explained much better in this way. 8 processes initially it had: setting up of a project, initiating a project, controlling a stage, managing stage boundaries, which is scope, closing a project, managing project delivery. This is where you can invoke Scrum model, you can invoke Agile, planning a directing a project. So there are 8 different processes. In a nutshell, when you look at Prince2 framework, there are quite few components. It is based on business case. It looks at customer organization. It emphasizes planning at various stages. It ensures that the controls in terms of what is the code measured and is it measured and they are being managed based on plan versus action. It manages the risk, and it also emphasizes on quality in a project environment. Configuration management is addressed here. Change control is also addressed here. Now, in a nutshell, the project success criteria from the Prince2 perspective is the methods to be used, the organization, what are the main factors, the variables, roles and responsibilities of the people that are being involved, and the progress monitoring. These are the 5 different factors which will decide on the success of a Prince2 project. If you look at it, Prince2, you can denote Prince2 as a method which focuses 7 bar 7 bar 7, 7 principles, 7 themes, and 7 processes. The Prince2 project defines the variable on a project as cost is a variable, time is a variable, quality is a variable, scope is a variable, risk is a variable, benefit is a variable. The Prince2 defines the characteristics of a project as a project is said to be a project when it is temporary, unique, cross-functional team involved. It will entitle changes. It has got uncertainty. Okay, fine. Now, if you look at it alternatively, you can use Prince2 and Agile as well. Okay, Agile and Prince2 can be used together. There is nothing wrong in that. And if you look at it, Scrum in Prince2, these are the processes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 processes. Scrum method can be incorporated when you have a delivery as a process. So it is always possible that you can invoke agile processes into any of the project management methodology, which can coexist together. So advantages, PIM offers the Prince2 process model summary is it offers in-depth project management principles, 7 bar 7 bar 7, 7 principles, 7 process, 7 themes. Very detailed description and templates are available so that you can start using it for managing multiple stages of project. You can tailor it to your own organization, to the project specific, customer specific. Focus is more on the products and other key principles, and it is always from a customer perspective. Everything can have some limitations. There are quite few limitations. The detailed techniques are not provided, and it also does not speak about the leadership. There are the 2 important shortcomings. Fine. I think we are done with that. Okay, and our time is also up. We are done with that. What we will actually do is next week when we start, next session when we start, we're going to only look at the application of the concept that we have learned, because without which there is no meaning, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run 3 important scenarios. Okay. Now I would ask you to read each of the scenario, and I would invite you to comment upon what is the kind of a model, software business model, software model has to be used for each of the scenario, and I will correct you. Okay. So then you become ready. Otherwise, there's no question of I alone being talking to each other. But remember, respond to the calls. When I'm going to ask you to read, please, I will unmute you, read it. When I'm going to invite you to comment on, when somebody is reading, all of you, please look at the slide, understand the scenario, because I'm going to at random ask you to provide the scenario. What is the software development model that you have to use? You will have to. It might be wrong. Don't worry, I will correct it. But your intervention, your involvement is required. All right. Good. Fine. So we are done with this session. Thank you very much, and have a great weekend to all of you. I will now. What I do is